Suggest we put on these authentic Wamapoke headdresses and dance around the table.
Absolutely not. That sounds highly offensive.
Does it, white man?
No, it's not offensive, so let's do it.
You first.
So clearly, this is not offensive.
It is offensive.
I am very sorry.
Take it off.
Michael Schur's Parks and Recreation has a lot to celebrate. The character development and complex storylines create a hilarious and intriguing show across all 7 seasons that only gets better as it goes on. But we're not here to marvel at the show's genius, but to highlight an aspect of it that goes underappreciated. Historically, representing Native Americans in a multidimensional way has been a struggle for American media. What Parks and Rec does is clever and ahead of its time regarding representation. The writers of Parks and Rec use the fictional town of Pawnee as a medium to write historical satire demonstrated by murals and the reoccurrence of the character Ken Hotate, played by Jonathan Joss, to depict Native Americans in a modern and multidimensional way. Starting with their decision to hire an actual Native American from Texas in Jonathan Joss to play the character, Parks and Rec avoids whitewashing their Native American characters, already putting them a step ahead of many other forms of representation in the media. Let's take a look at how the writers used Ken Hotate as a plot device to move the butt of the joke from Native Americans to the colonists. In Season 3, Episode 7, the main character, Leslie Knope, hosts the town's annual harvest festival on the Wamapoke ancestral lands. Take a look.
Leslie, you gotta see this.
Thank you for having me. The fact is, this carnival is being held on top of an ancient Wamapoke burial site.
Much like the house in the movie Poltergeist.
Exactly. I spoke to Leslie Knope of the Parks Department about moving the carnival, and she refused.
We do have exclusive animation of that event. Let's take a look.
Oh, I love these things. Sorry.
Is that what happened?
None of that happened.
That is exactly what happened.
In this scene, the audience isn't laughing at Ken, but with him, as he takes advantage and makes fun of how gullible Leslie and the town of Pawnee are. In contrast to other forms of Native American humor in the past, like in Peter Pan, the audience finds themselves on the same side as Ken, using humor not to contribute to othering, but to eliminate it. The scene does have its drawbacks, as exotifying does occur in the animation section of the news segment. However, it is still interpreted as satire and not a serious depiction. Leslie and the town are so gullible that instead of Native Americans being depicted as simple or one-dimensional, the town adopts that role, making them the butt of the joke instead of the Native Americans. And also, on the carnival issue itself, the town is siding with Ken's perspective in trying to move the festival off of ancestral lands. Parks and Rec does a fantastic job of weaving an issue as deep as land ownership into a 22-minute comedic episode, highlighting the importance of ancestral land and making the audience aware of the issue as well. Here's another one of my favorite scenes.
Ken, I'm coming to you on my knees, begging for help. Much like the early settlers of Pawnee begged the Wamapoke 200 years ago.
But that was
a trick, and over 50 Wamapoke were slaughtered.
It's important to note as well that the Wamapoke are almost always displayed in a position of power when in the same spaces as Pawneeans. Instead of being deemed as lower or less than, the camera is positioned in a way that makes Ken look big and powerful, taking up almost a third of the frame while Leslie asks for help.
Were slaughtered, I know, but this is not a trick. I am prepared to put the Wamapoke history exhibit inside the carnival grounds, right past the entrance turnstile, so that you have to look at it before you start having fun.
Now that's interesting.
I'm just trying to do something good for this town, and I'm trying to save my friends' jobs. Can you help me out here?
A Native American tribe making a deal with the government. What could go wrong?
This little laugh here by Leslie also just rounds out an already funny scene, with the writers acknowledging exactly what they're doing. And right when you think you're on the same side as Leslie, she does this.
You can have the generator, Leslie.
Thank you, Ken.
And I'll issue a statement saying that the curse has been lifted.
Well, actually, I have another idea.
Maleve, Malehu, Wapa Kuka, Malehe, Dubi, Dubi, Du. With that sacred ceremony, the Wamapoke curse has been lifted.
Wow, thank you. Intense stuff from Ken Hotate.
The writers make fun of people's narrow view towards Native Americans, seeing them in only one way during the ceremony, where again, as we as the audience are placed in a position of situational irony, where we feel like we're in on the joke, while the Pawneeans in the show are completely oblivious. It adds to the relationship we feel like we have with Ken and the Wamapoke. We're with them and not laughing at them. The presence of Ken in the show is meant to make people laugh. The character is brilliantly cast and written, while also flipping the script on traditional Native American humor. It holds the same building blocks like curses, ceremonies, and other spiritual elements as old humor, but instead of sitting back and pointing at those things and laughing at them, the writers put the audience in with Ken and the Wamapoke, making Pawnee the victims and the Wamapoke the comedians. Pawnee has a terrible, complex history. For a fake town, the writers placed a ton of emphasis on the founders of the town's relationship with the indigenous who populated the land before Pawneeans got there. Throughout the series, there are hints to this history depicted in the murals within City Hall, where all of the main characters work. We're going to look at a few of them and analyze Native American representation within them and attempt to break down the purpose of its humor. The first one arrives when Leslie is explaining to a reporter the history behind the painting. One of my favorite aspects of this scene is Leslie's acknowledgement of how horrible the paintings are. She says they get a ton of complaint letters every day, and in doing this, the show once again makes the audience feel like it's part of the town. You feel like when you're watching the show that you could be a citizen of Pawnee, arguing against City Hall and what it stands for. One thing Leslie says a little bit later when she's talking to her friend Anne is that there's a lot of kids who see the murals, so they have to cover up some of the more gruesome parts. It's ironic that the only part that they end up covering up is the blood and gore, and not the arguably gruesome depictions of the ways Native Americans were treated in the Cannonball example. It pokes fun at how it's well known that people don't want their kids to see things with blood and guts, but at the same time are willing to show them these brutal, dehumanizing murals. Like with this mural as well, they immediately show the audience that stereotyping like this is completely unacceptable, while also maintaining lightheartedness in the scene. In this way, humor can be used in media to create sympathy in an audience and start a discussion about what happened. As we know, language determines a large part of reality, so the more discourse that happens on a subject, the more it becomes widely accepted. The description of this painting always makes me laugh. Painted in 1936, the mural depicts the trial of Chief Wamapoke, who was accused of being Indian. Tragically, in 1834, that was a crime punishable by death. Despite the proximity of the cannon to Wamapo's body, the cavalry missed him on their first two shots, but on the third shot, they got lucky and hit his left shin. He died several years later of old age. But what is this humor actually doing for the audience, and how is it painting Native American history? I think it relates to the point made about Ken, how flipping the script of who the butt of the joke is can turn a negative connotation into a positive one. It can build trust and sympathy within an audience. In this example specifically, the attempts made by colonists to try Chief Wamapoke failed, showing that the justification to put him on trial wasn't even right in the first place. Here, Parks and Rec acknowledges the absurdity of America's history with colonialism and uses humor to accentuate how illogical it was. Media can use history to its advantage to shape how an audience perceives a group of people or a social issue. Parks and Rec uses the town's fake origin story to tell stories of what the colonists really did to Native Americans during Manifest Destiny. Parks and Rec is a brilliant show about more than just a group of government workers. The writers' due diligence in research and expert storytelling of history through murals and Ken Hotate go beyond the influence of just comedy. All in all, the show does a fantastic job of spreading refreshing, positive narrative about Native Americans to millions of viewers.